A mode where you put into an infinite period of time, enemies with a bottomless pit of manpower, your nerves are getting worse by the minute. That is what endless mode is, an endurance mode that goes on forever. But usually, randomized parameters are often placed to make the combat scenario more and more difficult the longer you survive. There are a number of games that have a survival mode, or an endless mode as I have put it. Some of the most well-known FPS franchises like Halo and Call of Duty had it. World at War introduced zombies to Call of Duty and has been a staple mode ever since. Then there was Firefight, a mode from ODST where you fought waves of Covenant until you died. You see, those were just additions to a game full of other modes. The game I'm going to be talking about in this video is a game that is centered around the whole idea of an endless mode. Devil Daggers, a one-level shooter that is both strategic and arcadey at the same time, favoring low-poly graphics akin to the PS1, but following a more old-school approach to the gameplay itself. It was released in 2016, made by a game developer in Australia known as Sarath. Initially, it seems relatively simple. You collect the dagger item, and then you're thrust into a dark place with only the floor illuminating any light. It's not long, however, until you're attacked by a number of flying skulls. Your main weapon is your hand that has two different methods of attack. First is the full auto spray that shoots a volley of projectiles at the enemies. Then you have what is in your hand. Then you have what is equivalent to a shotgun. Your hand can eventually be upgraded based on how many red gems you hold, which can be attained by killing the squid towers, the horned skulls, spiders, centipedes, and their variants, so to speak. The game is a constant gauntlet that progressively gets more stressful and difficult as the enemies start to randomize the arena's flow. I'll provide a video in the description showing a record run done by a top player, so you can see just how insane it becomes after 500 seconds. It's intense, visually stimulating and hard as nails, but also minimalistic in its presentation, and polished in its sense of combat and movement. Devil Daggers makes do with what little it provides, but adds a number of variations around it that makes it quite in-depth in its own way. The very best players can exceed over 1,000 seconds, which is insane considering how much the game throws at you by the time you reach that number. At first glance, it would seem impossible, but there are viable strategies that have worked for these players. And that's the key thing here, having a plan of surviving for as long as possible, as well as segmenting each section, so that you always go into it with the most optimal strategy possible. Now with your two main weapons, you can collect gems that progressively make them stronger. Collect enough gems and you get an upgraded version of it, indicated by a flashing screen and a change in the color and appearance of your hand. The final upgrade is very hard to obtain, but once you have it, the enemies become a lot easier to put down. But even then, this game will kick your ass, and if I'm being honest, I'm still getting the hang of it. I had managed to finally kill the centipede by getting under it and shooting all of its gems in one go, which is a technique that requires positioning and a degree of patience. Its soundtrack is very minimal, doesn't really have a story to speak of, but the aesthetics and PS1 style graphics give it a nice touch. The enemy designs both move fluently and are well made. A lot of the game hinges on the direction of sound, which will be a lifesaver in this game, using auditory cues for the player to warn them of the coming danger, and over time you'll be able to identify threats as the audio kicks in. To get the best effect of its sound design, I would recommend wearing headphones to get the optimal experience. Devil Daggers was the gem of 2016, a small but addictive game where the constant reward loop is the extension of your own survival. And while there are a number of games that provide an endless mode of sorts like Halo, Call of Duty, Killing Floor, and Left 4 Dead, Devil Daggers is centralized in this one specific mode. If you're looking for something similar but with a different look, then I'd recommend Crossbow Blood Knight, which is another good endless mode game. Upon playing Crossbow Blood Knight, you'll already find similarities in terms of how Devil Daggers plays. There is more visual detail, but I prefer the more minimal and horror-like approach that Devil Daggers provides. In Crossbow Blood Knight, you're going up against a variety of enemies, with pod-like organisms spawning enemies as well as other enemies spawning randomly across a single arena. If you've come from Devil Daggers, then it's pretty much the same deal here. Kill the enemies for as long as possible until you finally get put down, and as the fight goes on, more and more enemies will spawn, and it will become more randomized and chaotic. Both games are incredibly cheap and don't take up too much space at all on the computer, and run on low-spec rigs for those who are running on a budget. Devil Daggers is a small but amazing game. Go check it out. Thank you for watching.